Okay, episode 12, B12. You trick or treat, you don't get it from your meat. So you got to check out the episode. It's mind-blowing, actually. So I'm here. I'm going to talk about B12 a little bit, talk about where we get our B12 from. Where do we get our B12? Did you know that B12 is one of the most important nutrients there is? Without it, we don't exist. I've talked about how vitamin C, without vitamin C, we can get scurvy, we can get diseased really quick and literally die without vitamin C. If vitamin C was completely void of being in you and being part of your life, well, B12 is a big part of that too. That's the big one right there is B12. But where do we get our B12? What foods do we get our B12 in? Like, do we get B12 from our food? The episode at Medical Medium Podcast at Apple Podcast. You can't miss this episode. Seriously, guys, this one's a good one. This one's a good link is in the description. And I know a lot of people that heard it already that are just like, okay, that one, that one right there was really good. So you got to check it out. Link is in the description right there. Danielle says, "Hi Anthony, just listened to the B12 podcast. Love it. Oh, so glad you listened to it. Incredible." It's an important one because we have to understand B12. It's to protect ourselves. And, you know, in this day and age with all that's going on with emotional hardships and losses, I mean, how many hard times did you go through with emotions and with other people and breakups? And I know a friend of mine got divorced, and I know all kinds of things that people are going through, and it just takes the toll. And you could go through a lot with these different emotional struggles and hardships. And B12, we just lose our B12. We lose it. And where are we getting it from? Are we getting it from foods? Which foods have it? Well, you got to hear this episode. So you just have to. Medical Medium Podcast at Apple Podcast. It's B12. It's trick or treat. You don't get it from meat. Why do I say that? And I'm going to talk about it a little bit in a couple of minutes. Talk about like vegans and plant-based people where they're afraid about not getting their B12 and where do they get their B12? How do they get their B12? It's a big fear. And I even talk about it in this episode, you guys. I talk about that kind of thing happening is like you go plant-based. I'm a huge supporter of plant-based movement, plant-based diets. I'm a supporter of animal-based diets too, clean animal-based diets too and all that. But the point is that I feel bad for the plant-based and vegan people all these years. I feel bad for them because they get attacked with certain tricks. That's why trick or treat, okay? You don't get it from meat. Because what happens is they're being told once you go vegan, it's like, okay, you wake up one morning like, I'm starting my vegan plant-based diet. I got inspired by it. My friend got me hooked on it. I read something about it online. And all of a sudden, somebody told me like, you're not going to get your B12. You're going to die. Where are you going to get your B12? And all of a sudden you're in fear and chaos. And I talk about it in this episode too. It's really important. So, episode 12, Medical Medium Podcast at Apple Podcast. The link is in the description. Apple Podcast is the official platform where I launched this new podcast, the Medical Medium Podcast. This is different than the old radio shows. If you listen to this podcast at other places, other platforms, it's not going to be the same because this is the uncensored version. And I get it. The uncensored version gets a few people upset. I've seen that before out there already where I've seen some people complain and they're like, I like it when you're censored because you don't say all this stuff. And I like it kind of like, I don't like hearing about too much truth. I don't really want to hear about too much truth. I kind of don't want to hear that. And I understand that. But, look, it's tough times right there in the world. I was looking for a platform where I could be uncensored on. And Anita says, loving all your podcasts. Margie says, just finished listening to B12 podcast. Wow, thank you. Wasn't it good? Wasn't it a good one? I mean, I listened to it again today. Carolina says, I'm so high on B12, my doctor is concerned. You got to listen to this episode, Carolina. Check it out. And Medical Medium Podcast at Apple Podcast. Link is in the description, Carolina. I mean, look, the information's in there. When you hear about it, you'll be like, what? Oh my God, when you hear about how it works, like, if your B12's too high, if your B12's too low, B12 testing I talk about everything B12 there, but I also talk about things just nobody knows. That's the whole point. All of this is about what people don't know out there. It's really interesting. You guys have to hear the episode. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more. Lots to cover about that. But first I wanted to remind you guys, Did you listen to the brain fog episode? And did you listen to the neurological symptoms episode? Those are really important. Did you listen to the apple cider episode? That's another one. So Joan says, my B12 is off the charts. I take vitamin B12 every day. What happens is that it's best to have it, high and still do things for it and still be proactive in doing things for it and still take things for it. I talk to doctors all the time about this, and doctors are at a point, really good doctors out there now, they reach out to me and they want to understand B12 and they want to know what's going on because they don't teach anything like that out there. It's like I had a doctor tell me the other day that they don't teach that in medical school about B12 and where to get B12 from, and if it's active and usable. Is the B12 active? Is the B12 usable? And they don't even talk about that. Like, how does B12 work in the body? So it's so important. Elena says, you were just censored a few times. Ha 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 ha. That's funny. Nagain Fan. Hey, Hey, Dr. Fan. Incredible you're here. It's true. I see people who are not vegans who have low B12 levels. Amazing, incredible. So, so you see it, right, in your practice? Amazing doctor right there. Incredible doctor. Just if anybody wants to know. And, you've got an amazing doctor right there that knows so much about information that's healing people. And, the whole point is, it's like when you're plant-based, the biggest fear is B12. Where's your B12? How am I gonna survive? Am I gonna live? Am I gonna get sick? Is something terrible gonna happen to me? Is all my hair gonna fall out? Am I gonna get acne now? And if I don't, like all these questions, it's fear and chaos with vegans and plant-based people. And I get it that look, I get it. It's scary to go plant-based for a lot of people, and so the confusion's there. But there's a massive amount of confusion regarding where we get B12 from our food, okay? So why would plant-based people be told, hey, you're not going to have any B12, you're not going to get any B12 from your food? Why would they say that? Well, because fruits and the vegetables that people eat, right, including even leafy greens and herbs, they don't have B12 in them. So where are you going to get it? Because meat has B12 in that, right? In meat, chicken has B12, eggs has B12, but don't get too excited because I want to tell you something real quick. Eggs have B12, and oysters, clams. Don't run out and eat a bunch of oysters now. Don't run out and eat a bunch of clams now, right? And, you'll get a lot of toxic heavy metals, right? So anyway, so shrimp has B12. So, but the whole point is that B12 is not the B12 that our bodies use or utilize. That's the trick right there all on its own. So if you're an animal protein person, right, and you're like, hey, you're vegan, you're not going to get B12. Where are you going to get it? Or if you're a, doctor that, even vegan doctors. I talked to a vegan doctor last week that connected with me. Is like, look, I'm a vegan doctor, I'm a plant-based doctor, my patients are mostly plant-based, I take care of plant-based patients and all this kind of stuff. And even he was like, where do we get our B12? I was like, huh, what? And I was telling him, well, first of all, where does a meat eater get their B12? And he was like, well, from meat, right? You get it from meat, you get it from chicken, get it from eggs. And I'm like, no, you don't. You don't. That's why meat eaters are also B12 deficient too. So just for the record, there's the majority of B12 deficient people are people who eat animal products. And I'm not against animal products or people eating animal products. If you guys know me by now, I'm all about answers, and you can plug it into whatever diet belief system you have. You guys know that's how I am. Like, you can plug in this information if you want to eat some meat, and that's what you want to do. You can plug it in if you want to be plant-based. It's just about how do we heal? Where's the answers? What information can I give you so you can heal with what the diet or platform you're on, right? You guys know that all about me. Medical medium tools are saving lives around the world that are both meat eaters and obviously plant-based, of course, right? But anyway, the whole point is like you can be low in B12 and be eating meat, chicken, and eggs. And You can also have B12 in your system from eating meat, chicken, and eggs, but that B12 doesn't mean it's working for you. It doesn't mean it's doing the things it does for you. And then we get sick down the road and we start falling apart. Things start going wrong. We get viral. We have other issues, and then we get in trouble. So the B12 is important for us, and it's Joan says following. Joan says mine is high also, so your B12 is also high. Yeah, and you can have high B12. Now, when you hear the episode, you'll understand, like, word for word, you'll hear it. You'll understand, like, what happens when it's high. What does that mean? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it working for you? Is it not working for you? So we can't get tricked by that either. Just because our B12 is high doesn't mean we're utilizing it exactly or utilizing all of it from our food. It doesn't mean our food is working for us. It's important. So have you guys heard the neurological symptom episode? You got to check this out. So Medical Meeting Podcast at Apple Podcast. Make sure you check these episodes out. The apple cider vinegar episode, that one there too. Neurological symptoms, brain fog, and the list goes on. There's 3 meditations I put out so far: the moon meditation, the brain meditation. Please check those out. Share them with other people if you can. Ichoda said B12 was a mind blower. I listened twice and then another couple of times to that poem at the end. Whoa. Wow, that's incredible. Thanks, Ichoda. Amazing. So the deal is about making sure that you know how to protect yourself and your family. You know, you might be somebody that wants to stay plant-based, but yet you're about to leave the plant-based movement because you're told, where's your B12? You might be somebody that's eating animal proteins, but you're low in B12 or even high in B12. But does that mean it's working? You're going to have to listen to the podcast if you can and take a few minutes out from your busy day and listen. And so you can learn about that too. Just because when you get a blood test and it says, oh, your B12 is normal, doesn't mean that's the B12 that's actually helping protect you so things don't go wrong, like, skin issues and other issues too, and a little bit of depression and all these other stuff. Because what happens is that B12 is critical for your immune system. It's critical for nerve function. So if you're up against low-grade viruses, like I've always talked about, if you're up against some Epstein-Barr, if you're up against some strep, if you're up against something else, the toxic heavy metals or other triggers I talk about, or emotional hardships, if you're up against some broken trust issues that happen, and betrayal, and maybe something else that happened in your life, and you're struggling emotionally and mentally, and the B12 is critical. So you got to catch this episode. It's really important right there. Jill says, the link is in the description, by the way. Jill says, the podcasts are life-changing. Thank you so much for everything you do. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I mean, I want you guys to know I put my all into these podcast episodes, and they're not like throwaways, because what happens with podcasts is you just get a bunch of people together and you just you do the coffee talk, on a podcast, and then throw that one away. Let's do another one. You know how podcasts work, where just keep on getting people on and just coffee talk it, and it's kind of like, okay, is this interesting or not? I just want you to know, when you hear this podcast, the Medical Meeting Podcast at Apple Podcast, when you hear these episodes, just know that wasn't the mindset here. That wasn't. This was about giving you guys tremendous amounts of information that's life-changing, like tools to really help you heal. That's what it was about. Like, it was when I was going to launch this Medical Meeting Podcast, it's like, wait a minute, you're not bringing all these people on 2-3 times a week and just doing coffee talk like everybody does? I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. No way. It's not going to happen. It's not going to be throwaways, and that's a big part of the podcast world right now. It's just like, throw that away. It's like cotton candy. It's like quick cotton candy and you throw it away. These are here for you to help your friends, your family. These are here to turn your lives around. These are here to actually give you viable information. Shirley Smith, I'm starting to listen to Neurological podcast. I really need help. I'm really glad you're listening to it. It's such an important one and so helpful, So anyway, you guys, it's Medical Meeting Podcast at Apple Podcast. Julie said, I like how funny you have become. Yeah. You know what? I was just holding back. Yeah, you guys are just, you're seeing the AW that has the more of a lighter heart, Elkie says, he's always been funny for sure. Absolutely appreciate your humor. Hey, thanks. You're awesome. Dr. Fawn, the reference range for B12 is also not good. So just looking at the numbers isn't enough. Brilliant man, brilliant doctor. I know you're helping so many people. Incredible. So when it comes down to B12, it's one of those things that I don't want anyone to overlook. This is one of those must listen to episodes, because does your health matter? Does your wellness matter? Does your well-being, does your emotional well-being matter? And so when we're missing the link with B12 and not understanding it, we can get really in trouble. Terry King says your podcasts are amazing. Thank you. They're so informative. Production is super high. I try to make the production as high quality as I can, you guys. Like, seriously, like, that's the whole point there too, is I just didn't want this to be a throwaway podcast. I get it. When people do podcasts out there, it's just coffee talk, throwaway, and not that the production's not great, because I get it. It's just, you wake up in the morning, you do your podcast, it's fun, it's kind of hip, and they're just throwaways. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to make sure that this was literally like a docu-series like style, like something that it gives you, information from above, healing information, and just and the quality was there, so you can move your life forward. It's just, that's what it was about. It was like, and someone told me, they were like, why are you going to do that? Why are you going to invest all your energy, your time, all of that into this? Why don't you just do what everybody else does? Just coffee talk it, talk, have fun, talk crap, and then it gets thrown away and the next one comes later. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. Nicholas says, love the Vinegar podcast. Every episode I've caught so far, mind-blowing, good. Well done, AW. Hey, share it. Share it with other people. You guys, we're a grassroots movement. I don't have PR and marketing, and never did, even though I'm a #1 New York Times bestseller with all the New York Times bestselling books and, millions of books around the world healing people. Even with all that said and done, I still do things that aren't this. I still do things that are not conventional. Like, I do things like much different, where I don't do the big PR, the big marketing. I don't do any of that. I kind of like, it's like wing or a prayer kind of thing, or whatever you want to call it. It's like, look, this has saved lives. The information saved lives. Let people share it to save other lives. And, and it's always been that way. So share these episodes if you can. You guys know that. Constance says, love you, AW, and Spirit of Compassion. Spirit of Compassion appreciates that. And Michelle says the podcasts are great. Intensity is required. And they're intense. These podcast episodes are intense for sure. And I remember when the first episode came out, I said to you guys, you might not want to hear this. And I said that. And I was straight up across the board, like, for real. I was like, you guys might not want to hear this podcast, because this podcast is really intense and over the top with information, but more than that, spooky too, in a way, because when you drop truth, there's a lot of people that don't want to hear it. I understand. I totally get that, and I respect that. Link is in the description. Medical Medium Podcast at Apple Podcast. Subscribe so you're notified. It's important. So if you're listening to the podcast at any other platform, please know that it's censored, or you're not hearing the whole thing, little pieces missing. You'd be surprised. There's little pieces missing in those. It doesn't seem like it. There is. So this is the platform here. It's Medical Medium Podcast at Apple Podcast. Link is in the description. Mary says, I loved all the details about B12. Incredible. I loved all the details about elevated biotics in B12 this morning. Yeah. The insects, right? I talk about the insects and in there and everything about that. You guys got to catch this episode. You really do. And, it's a Halloween special. So that's another one too. So it's B12, trick or treat. You don't get it from your meat. You don't get it from me. Anyway, so you want to listen to it and check it out. These podcast episodes they're, my heart and soul is in these, and it's not something like I'm just messing with, I get it. Podcast episodes out there, it's just about, hey, I want to start a podcast. Totally fine. And let's get some guests on and let's just ask kind of questions, whether they're not going to help people or not or anything. It's like, hey, look, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to make sure that this was a work that was for people to heal and get their lives back in a different way, like information and the meditations, so that people have a fighting chance. And you can't play around. You got to do things. You got to do things and for people. Like it has to be. So like in this podcast, I was like, you had to keep in mind, like, what do we need to do to get people better? How can we do this more and more? MJ says, please do a podcast on hives and skin rashes, please. I will. I have one that's in the works. I'm working on it, I promise. I felt like the B12 one was important. I felt apple cider vinegar was important because you might be that one person that can't move the needle because of that apple cider vinegar, and I have to think about that, of course, all of that. But you guys, so this is a really important one. Link is in the description. Don't miss this episode, whatever you do. Share this episode so people can protect themselves. And, you know, we talk about life being hard. We talk about how life's being challenging now. We talk about what's happening and what's going on out there. We're in a trying time and all this. Well, who's talking about what we need to protect ourselves so our nervous systems don't go downhill and fall apart? And so our mental stability doesn't start to rattle and shake because of, everything. And what about all the hardships people go through with everything that's happening out there? Like, who's looking out for people? I want to know. And this episode here, along with other episodes at the Medical Mean Podcast, are about, like, who's looking out for people? Like, that's the whole point. Like, are we looking out for people or what? Or are we just doing podcasts because we want a fancy podcast and have guests on and stuff, and which is great. But I just said, I can't do that this time. Like, I can't. Not that I ever did that. I wanted to make sure you guys get what you need, and that's what this is. The B12 episode is like quintessentially part of that. That's what I mean. This is like an example of not messing around. You guys need to know what's going on. You need to have the things you need. That's what it's about. Anyway, I love you guys. Check it out. Link is in the description, and take care.